The brush scrapes across stone, and the last veil of dust falls away. A team of archaeologists freezes, their lights trembling over a site that should not exist. This is the moment a single tomb defies history. Experts are now confronting a burial chamber that shatters our timeline, a discovery so profound it is forcing textbooks to be rewritten. By the end of this, you will understand the full, staggering mystery of an artifact that simply cannot be. What secrets lie sealed inside a structure built with impossible knowledge, and who was it meant to house for eternity? What does it say about our past when the ground offers a truth we are not prepared to accept? If you could rewrite one chapter of human history, which story would you change first? The entrance was found not in a famous royal valley, but carved into the side of a forgotten plateau in a region long considered a historical backwater. For decades, archaeologists had surveyed this area, cataloging simple graves and modest settlements that fit neatly into the established narrative of a pastoral, late Bronze Age culture. They expected another chieftain's burial, perhaps with a few bronze daggers and ceramic pots. What they uncovered was a geometric nightmare. The tomb's doorway was a perfect arch, a construction technique not seen in the region for another 1,000 years. The stone blocks around it were fitted together with such precision that a credit card could not slide between the seams. There were no rough chisel marks, only smooth, machine-like surfaces that felt cold and alien under the work gloves of the team. A stunned silence fell over the trench, broken only by the dry desert wind. One senior researcher later said the feeling was not of excitement, but of deep cognitive dissonance, as if they had opened a textbook to a familiar chapter only to find the pages printed in a language they had never seen. The symbols flanking the arch were the final confirmation. They were not the local script. They bore a haunting, partial resemblance to Proto-Canaanite letters, yet arranged around a central motif that echoed designs found only in Mesoamerican ruins across an ocean no one of that era could have crossed. This was the first concrete clue that they were not just looking at an anomaly, but at an impossibility deliberately set in stone. The doorway was just the beginning, a prelude to a deeper chronological rebellion. To understand the tomb's true challenge, we must first understand how archaeologists normally pin a date to the past. They rely on a powerful trio of methods. The first is radiocarbon dating, which measures the decay of carbon atoms in organic material like wood, bone, or cloth. It is a molecular clock that ticks with relentless precision. The second is stratigraphy, the simple law that in an undisturbed site, deeper layers are older than the layers above them. The third is artifact typology, comparing the style of pottery, tools, or weapons to other dated finds. When these three methods sing in harmony, history has a firm date. In this tomb, they screamed in discord. Samples were taken with meticulous care. Charred wood from a ceremonial lamp wick, linen fibers from a disintegrated shroud, even flecks of resin used to seal the burial chamber. Each sample was sent to multiple independent labs, a standard practice to eliminate error. The results did not just contradict expectations, they obliterated them. The organic materials consistently returned dates clustered around 3,200 years before the present. This placed the tomb's use firmly in the late Bronze Age, around 1200 BCE. That date alone was puzzling, given the architectural sophistication. But the real shock came from the mortar binding the stones. Analysis revealed a complex hydraulic lime-based compound, a material whose recipe was not developed in that region until the Roman era, over 1,000 years later. It was as if finding a stainless steel screw holding together a Viking longship. The team faced a cascade of impossible questions. Was the tomb built in the Bronze Age with Roman-era technology? Or was a Roman-era structure built with Bronze Age organic materials? Both scenarios defied every model of technological progression. Skepticism was immediate and fierce. Colleagues suggested contamination, a modern substance seeping into the samples, so the tests were run again and again, each time with stricter controls. The dates held. The typology of the few grave goods, simple ceramic vessels found near the entrance, matched the early date, yet the architecture screamed a later age. This created a chronological ghost, an edifice caught between two worlds belonging wholly to neither. The ground itself seemed to be presenting two conflicting truths, and science, the very tool meant to resolve such mysteries, could only confirm the paradox. The paradox of the tomb's date was only the surface of a deeper mystery waiting within the sealed chamber. When the inner door was finally breached, the air inside was still and cold, holding its breath for millennia. The beam of an archaeologist's headlamp swept across a collection of objects that seemed to defy the very flow of time. The first was a small, intricate assembly of bronze gears and plates resting on a stone pedestal. It was unmistakably a mechanism, its design bearing a chilling resemblance to the Antikythera device, that ancient Greek analog computer used to predict astronomical positions. Yet here it sat, in a tomb dated over 1,000 years before the Greeks even developed such sophisticated metalworking. One gear fragment had markings that appeared to chart lunar cycles, a technology not associated with this culture for another 15 centuries. It was like finding a pocket watch in a pharaoh's sarcophagus. Beside it lay a sculpture carved from obsidian, depicting a creature with a massive, sloping body and long, curved tusks. A paleozoologist brought in as a consultant took one look and went pale. It was a detailed, accurate representation of a woolly mammoth, an animal that went extinct in this region at least 6,000 years before this tomb was supposedly sealed. The artist could not have seen one, not in life, not in bones buried deep under permafrost. So how did the image exist with such anatomical precision? Then there was the map. It was not drawn on parchment, but etched into a thin sheet of hammered gold. It showed landmasses, coastlines that were hauntingly familiar yet profoundly wrong. The continents were not in their modern positions, but in a configuration that geologists recognize from the late Cretaceous period, over 60 million years ago. It depicted a world without human witnesses, a planet of dinosaurs and shifting supercontinents. No known civilization possessed this geological knowledge until the 20th century. Finding it here was not just anachronistic, it was apocalyptic to the historical narrative. Finally, resting across the stone coffin itself was a weapon. It appeared to be a short sword, but its blade had a dull, gray sheen that was neither bronze nor iron. Material analysis revealed it was an early form of stainless steel, an alloy that requires precise control of chromium and carbon, a metallurgical feat not achieved until the Industrial Age. The handle was wrapped in leather that dated to the Bronze Age, but the blade was from a future its creator should never have known. Specialists from every related field were summoned, and their reactions were a symphony of disbelief. The astronomer stared at the gears and kept repeating it was not possible. The geologist traced the etched coastlines with a trembling finger, whispering names of prehistoric seas. The metallurgist simply shook his head, stating the composition of the blade was a statistical impossibility for the era. Each expert, armed with the certainty of their own discipline's timeline, found that certainty shattered against the physical evidence in that room. The artifacts did not just contradict history, they presented a collage of times that never should have met, forcing a terrifying question. Were these objects proof of a lost, advanced civilization that knew both mammoths and machinery, or were they evidence of something else, a deliberate message placed out of time? The tomb was no longer just a burial, it had become a museum of impossibilities, and its curator remained a silent, enigmatic mystery. The artifacts were a puzzle of time, but the walls that held them were a declaration of intent. The tomb's architecture itself was a silent, screaming manifesto of impossible knowledge. Stepping inside was not entering a simple burial chamber. it was crossing a threshold into an engineered reality that defied its own era. The layout was a geometric hybrid that chilled the experts to their core. The main chamber was a perfect circle, a shape of profound symbolic meaning but immense structural difficulty to build underground. Supporting this wide, domed space were not crude pillars, but elegantly tapered columns that flared at the top, a style unmistakably reminiscent of Minoan architecture from the island of Crete, a civilization separated by a vast sea and several centuries from this location. Yet these columns framed archways, not the simple corbelled arches known to ancient builders, but true, load-bearing Roman arches with keystones locked perfectly in place. This was a fusion of styles from different continents and millennia, combined with a seamless confidence that suggested the builders saw no contradiction in their use. The construction techniques were even more baffling. The walls were made of megalithic blocks, each weighing several tons, fitted together with the same jaw-dropping precision as the stones of Göbekli Tepe, that mysterious Turkish site from 11,000 years ago. The joins were so tight, so flawless, that they seemed to grow from a single piece of rock. But between these giant stones was not simple mud or clay mortar. It was that strange, resilient compound, a concrete-like material that had already confounded the dating teams. It was as if the builders had the raw, primal power to move mountains, paired with the sophisticated chemistry of a much later age. Then there were the shafts, two narrow, perfectly straight tunnels angled upward from the burial chamber, piercing through 30 feet of solid bedrock to the open air. They immediately brought to mind the so-called air shafts of the Great Pyramid of Giza, often theorized to have astronomical alignments. When researchers pointed laser theodolites up these passages, the discovery was another shock. One shaft was aligned to the point on the horizon where the star Sirius would have risen at its brightest around 1200 BCE. This was impressive but known. The second shaft, however, targeted a far dimmer star in the constellation Cygnus. The problem was, due to the slow wobble of Earth's axis known as precession, that particular star would not have occupied that precise position in the night sky for over 13,000 years before the tomb's construction, and would not return to it for another 26,000 years after. It was an alignment with a celestial event no human alive at the time of building could have witnessed, requiring knowledge of a cycle that takes 26,000 years to complete. This implied an understanding of astronomy that was not just advanced but truly ancient, passed down from an inconceivably distant past. Contrast this with the typical burials of the region and period. Archaeologists expected a simple pit grave, or at most a small, rectangular cist tomb made of rough, unworked stones piled together. The deceased would be laid in a flexed position, accompanied by a personal pot and a simple bronze blade. There was no concept of architectural grandeur, no engineered spaces, and certainly no precise celestial orientations. The local culture was one of herdsmen and farmers, not master architects and astronomer priests. This tomb stood among them like a silicon chip on a slate tablet. The engineering prowess required to execute this design spoke of a deep grasp of mathematics for calculating load and stress, of physics for understanding the distribution of weight through arches and domes, and of a surveying skill so precise it could track the imperceptible drift of stars across millennia. It was a blueprint that seemed to have fallen from another age, or perhaps from an age that never was, leaving behind a stone skeleton that our history cannot explain. All this impossible architecture and these timeless artifacts pointed toward a single, central question, a mystery of flesh and bone at the very heart of the chamber. Who or what was laid to rest here? The stone coffin was not empty, but what it contained deepened the enigma. The skeletal remains were of a single individual, but they defied every expectation. Forensic anthropologists were called in to study the bones, and their initial report sent a new wave of disbelief through the team. The individual was tall, remarkably so for the era, with a reconstructed stature of over 6.5 feet. This was a giant among the typically shorter-statured local population. More intriguing than the height was the physiology. The bone density was exceptionally high, and the muscle attachment points on the limbs were pronounced, suggesting a life of immense physical activity or a genetic predisposition to unusual strength. The skull showed a slight, unusual elongation at the back, not from cultural head binding, but from a natural cranial structure that did not match any known regional phenotypes. It was the body of an outlier, a person who would have stood out in a crowd not just in size but in fundamental build. The burial position was the next shock. This was no simple flexed burial curled in a pit. The individual had been placed in a seated position upon a carved stone chair, a throne really, set at the far end of the circular chamber. The posture was regal, upright, with the spine straight and the hands resting on the armrests as if holding court for eternity. This seated burial was a practice known in only a handful of cultures worldwide, and none within 1,000 miles or 1,000 years of this site. It was a pose of eternal authority, of watchful repose. Surrounding the throne were not the typical personal effects, but a collection of symbols that seemed to gather the world's idea of rulership into one room. Carved into the stone chair was the double-headed eagle, a symbol of empire known from Hittite seals and millennia later, Byzantine and Holy Roman heraldry. On the wall behind the throne was a painted relief of a staff topped with a pine cone, a symbol of life and enlightenment associated with the ancient Mesopotamian god Tammuz, and later with Dionysian mysteries in Greece. Resting at the skeleton's feet was a ceremonial mace, its head shaped like a solar disk with radiating spikes, echoing the later iconography of the Zoroastrian divinity Ahura Mazda. It was a pantheon of power, a collage of sovereignty drawn from cultures separated by vast distances and centuries, all assembled to honor this one individual. The grave goods intended for the afterlife painted a portrait of a being who was both a ruler and a traveler of realms. Alongside the anachronistic artifacts were more personal items, a small, worn leather satchel that crumbled at the touch, and within it, a collection of seeds from plants native to 3 different continents, plants that should not have been in contact for another 2,000 years. There were also thin sheets of mica, a mineral that can be split into transparent sheets, etched with star maps that showed different celestial poles, as if charting a journey across the sky or across the globe. This suggests an occupant who was not just a local king, but perhaps a navigator, a gatherer of knowledge, or someone believed to be on a journey that transcended death itself. The most haunting theory, however, is the cenotaph hypothesis. Some researchers point to the strange lack of wear on the throne seat where the body rested, and the ceremonial, almost staged arrangement of the bones. Could this entire impossible structure, this museum of chronological defiance, be not a true burial but a memorial, a tomb built for a figure who was not inside it, perhaps because they never died or because their body was lost? A cenotaph is a powerful statement, a monument to an absence so significant it demands a place of honor. It implies the occupant was not just important but perhaps mythic, a being whose influence demanded a physical anchor point in the world even if their fate was unknown. Was this the tomb of a god-king who was believed to have ascended, a traveler from a lost world who never returned, or a symbolic burial for an idea, for knowledge itself, sealed away in a time capsule of stone? The bones offer no clear answers, only a silent, imposing figure at the center of a storm of impossibilities, a sovereign without a kingdom in our history books. The walls of the tomb did not just hold up the ceiling, they spoke. Etched into the stone around the seated figure was a silent, sprawling text that has become the project's most enduring frustration. It is a script unlike any other on Earth, a cryptic gallery of symbols that linguists have dubbed the Chronos Code. The characters are a maddening fusion, as if someone took the angular wedges of early Sumerian cuneiform and forced them into the flowing, pictographic shapes of Minoan Linear A. then added entirely new geometric forms that have no parallel in any known alphabet. It is not a language, it is a linguistic chimera. Teams of the world's top epigraphers and military cryptographers, experts who have broken ancient codes and deciphered lost tongues, have been brought to their knees by this wall. They have applied every tool, from frequency analysis used on the Rosetta Stone to artificial intelligence algorithms designed to detect linguistic patterns. Every attempt hits the same silent wall. The symbols do not follow the rules of any human language structure. There is no consistent directionality, no clear separation between words, and no repetition of phrases that would suggest a royal title or a funerary prayer. It is either a code of unimaginable complexity or a language built on principles we do not yet understand. One symbol appears with haunting regularity, carved larger and deeper than the others. It is a triple spiral, 3 interconnected coils spinning out from a central point. It is found at the top of every major inscription, like a chapter heading for eternity. To a Celtic archaeologist, it would evoke the famous Triskelion of Newgrange, a symbol of life cycles and solar motion. To a physicist, it looks like a diagram of a triple helix or a vortex. Its meaning here is utterly opaque. Another recurring motif is a cluster of 7 dots arranged in a very specific, lopsided pattern. An astronomer ran the configuration through star mapping software and felt a chill. It is a perfect match for the Pleiades star cluster, but not as it appears today. The relative positions of the dots reflect the precise alignment of those stars as they would have been seen from this location roughly 100,000 years ago. This is not an observation a Bronze Age scribe could have made. It is a snapshot of a deep time sky frozen in stone. The most unsettling images are the hybrid creatures that punctuate the text. There is a being with the head of a ram, the wings of an eagle, and the coiled tail of a serpent, seated atop what looks like a schematic of an atom. Another shows a humanoid figure holding a staff that emits wavy lines, standing before a crowd of people with simplified, boxy bodies. To some researchers, this looks less like mythology and more like instruction, a visual guide to concepts we cannot grasp. The central question torturing the decipherment team is one of intent. Is this a true language, a lost tongue of a civilization so advanced its very grammar is foreign to us? Or is it a deliberate obfuscation, a permanent lock placed on the tomb's secrets? Some argue for the latter, pointing to the way certain symbols seem to shift meaning based on their placement, like a contextual cipher meant to be read only by initiates with a key that is now dust. Others whisper a more radical idea. What if it is not a human language at all, but a symbolic system meant to convey multidimensional or mathematical concepts that linear speech cannot contain? The walls shout in a voice no one can hear, a permanent testament to knowledge that walked away from the world, leaving only its indecipherable shadow behind. The silent script on the walls was not the only voice speaking from another place. The very dust of the tomb floor held a biological testimony that was equally confounding. When archaeologists sifted through the sediment at the foot of the stone throne, they found a collection of organic remains that painted a map of an impossible world. Preserved in the dry, sealed environment were not just local grains, but a handful of tiny, desiccated seeds. To a botanist, they were immediately recognizable and immediately impossible. One type was a variant of maize or corn, but with a genetic profile suggesting a primitive, early domesticated strain. The problem was, maize was exclusively cultivated in the Americas, its domestication beginning in modern-day Mexico nearly 9,000 years ago. This seed, however, was found in a Bronze Age tomb in the Eastern Hemisphere, a full 3,000 years before any accepted transoceanic contact. Another seed was from the bottle gourd, a plant whose wild ancestors are split between Africa and Asia, yet this particular subspecies showed markers linking it to African strains. How did it cross such a vast ecological barrier? Mixed with these were microscopic pollen grains from the kapok tree, a species native to the tropical rainforests of Central and South America, and from the baobab, the iconic tree of the African savanna. This was not the result of wind or bird migration. The distances were too vast and the pollen too well preserved. It was a deliberate collection, a pocketful of continents. Then there were the bones. Among the few animal remains, likely from food offerings, was a small carved figurine of an animal with a long neck, striped hindquarters, and short, horn-like ossicones on its head. A zoologist identified it without hesitation, an okapi. This shy, forest-dwelling relative of the giraffe lives only in the dense rainforests of the Democratic Republic of Congo in Central Africa, a creature utterly unknown to the ancient world outside that region. Its image, carved with startling accuracy, sat in a tomb thousands of miles from its hidden home, but the most jarring depiction was painted in faded ochre on a section of wall, showing a group of upright, flightless birds with black backs and white fronts gathered on a rocky shore. They were unmistakably penguins, not the mythical beasts of medieval maps, but anatomically correct renditions of a species like the African penguin or the Galapagos penguin. This placed the artist's knowledge on the coasts of southern Africa, or, even more incredibly, the equatorial Pacific Islands. Both locations were far beyond the maritime horizons of any civilization from this time and place. These biological bafflers strike at the heart of our models for ancient human movement. The established story is one of slow, incremental expansion, with trade networks extending only to neighboring regions. A seashell might travel inland, or a piece of obsidian might move a few hundred miles from its volcanic source, but a seed cannot walk, an okapi cannot swim an ocean. The presence of these items suggests one of two radical possibilities, each rewriting history. The first is the existence of a prehistoric global network, a web of exploration, an exchange far older and more extensive than we ever imagined. Could a forgotten maritime culture, possessing knowledge lost to later civilizations, have navigated the oceans carrying seeds and stories between continents? This would mean our timelines for human discovery are catastrophically wrong, that the world was connected millennia before the Phoenicians or the Polynesians set sail. The second, more symbolic possibility is just as profound. Perhaps these items were not physical evidence of travel, but symbolic representations of a cosmic or mythological worldview. In many ancient cultures, animals from distant lands were seen as magical beings from the edges of the world, embodiments of elemental powers or distant realms. The okapi, a creature of the deep, dark forest, might symbolize the mysterious unknown. The penguin, thriving in both icy and tropical waters, could represent adaptability or mastery over opposing elements. The seeds might not be for planting, but as tokens of life's diversity, a collection of the world's vitality to accompany the deceased on a spiritual journey. Yet, the accuracy of the depictions argues against pure myth. A mythical beast is usually a chimera, a blend of known animals. The okapi and the penguin are rendered with the specificity of observation. This leaves us straddling two worlds, between a literal history of global wanderers and a symbolic testament to a knowledge of the biosphere, so complete it feels like magic. Either way, the tomb asserts that its builder's world was not a small, isolated place, but a planet teeming with life from every corner, a map written in seeds and bone that we are only now beginning to trace. The biological evidence pointed to a world far wider than we knew, but the physical fabric of the tomb itself whispered of a technology far deeper than we can grasp. To understand the true scale of this enigma, we must look not at what was placed inside the tomb, but at what it was built from. The stones, the mortar, the metals, and even the colors on the wall are not passive materials. They are active participants in the mystery, each one a tiny rebellion against the timeline. Take the mortar binding those impossibly precise megaliths. Initial analysis confirmed it was a form of hydraulic lime concrete, a material that hardens underwater and is renowned for its durability. The Romans perfected it, using it to build harbors, aqueducts, and the Pantheon's majestic dome centuries after this tomb was sealed. Finding it here was like discovering a silicon microchip in a medieval castle. But when chemists broke down its molecular composition, they found an even stranger signature. The mix included a rare volcanic ash, a specific type of pozzolana, but not from any known source in the region. The closest geological match was to deposits found over 800 miles away, near a volcanic field that was not known to be a quarry site until the classical period. Transporting such bulk material across that distance in the Bronze Age would have been a logistical feat of staggering, almost nonsensical proportion. Then there are the metallic elements. We already encountered the strange steel of the short sword, but that was not alone. Small, almost decorative pins holding stone panels in place were analyzed and found to be made of a copper alloy with a trace percentage of arsenic and nickel. This combination produces a metal that is both harder and more corrosion-resistant than ordinary bronze, a sophisticated recipe that metallurgists associate with deliberate, advanced alloying techniques of a much later era. More perplexing were the thin, foil-like sheets found in a niche initially thought to be gold. Spectroscopy revealed they were actually an exceptionally pure form of aluminum. For context, aluminum is the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust, but it is never found pure in nature. Isolating it requires the Hall-Héroult process, an electrochemical method invented in the late 19th century that demands massive amounts of electricity. Finding even a fleck of pure aluminum in an ancient context is considered a monumental red flag, a classic, out-of-place artifact. Here, there were sheets of it. The implications are dizzying. It suggests either a method of extraction and refinement completely lost to history, or a source of the material we cannot begin to identify. Even the artistry defies chemical history. On sections of the wall, faded paintings depict celestial scenes and geometric patterns. When conservators took microscopic samples of the blue pigment, they expected to find crushed lapis lazuli or Egyptian blue, the common blues of antiquity. Instead, they identified synthetic ultramarine, a pigment made by heating a precise mixture of silica, alumina, soda, and sulfur. This vivid, stable blue was first manufactured in Europe in the 1800s, its complex chemistry thought to be a modern triumph. Its presence here, in a stable form that has not degraded over millennia, indicates a knowledge of high-temperature chemistry and precise ingredient control that simply did not exist. Sourcing and creating these materials would have required an invisible, advanced industrial backbone. Mining operations capable of identifying and extracting specific, rare ores from deep geological layers. Furnaces that could achieve and sustain temperatures far beyond those of simple Bronze Age kilns, temperatures needed for creating steel or synthesizing pigments. A grasp of chemistry so profound it understood atomic interactions to create alloys and compounds with desired properties. This is not the toolkit of a pastoral Bronze Age chieftaindom. It is the signature of a civilization with a structured scientific tradition. The tomb, therefore, presents us with a haunting duality. Its purpose feels ancient, spiritual, rooted in burial ritual and cosmic alignment, but its execution is hyper-advanced, technical, and materialistic. It is as if the spiritual aspirations of the Stone Age were handed the manufacturing capabilities of the Industrial Revolution and told to build a monument for eternity. The materials are not just anachronistic, they are a direct message written in the language of atoms and elements, stating clearly that the builders operated on a plane of knowledge that our historical narrative has no place for. They possessed a science that left no other trace, a technology that vanished, leaving only this silent, stubborn crypt as its sole and confounding witness. The tomb's materials whisper of a lost science, but its art shouts a forgotten geography. stepping back to view the chamber as a whole reveals a stylistic earthquake, a deliberate fusion of traditions that should never have met. This is not merely an anomaly, it is a curated gallery of global sacred art, assembled in one underground room with a confidence that ignores every map we have drawn of the ancient world. On the western wall, rising behind the seated figure, is a facade carved in unmistakable relief. It is the silhouette of a stepped pyramid, each level receding precisely, crowned with a small, temple-like structure. Any student of Mesoamerica would recognize it instantly as a classic Mayan pyramid design, like those at Tikal or Palenque. Yet, covering the surface of these stone steps are not Mayan glyphs, but thousands of the stylized Wedjat eyes, the Eye of Horus from Egyptian mythology. This protective symbol, meant to ward off evil and ensure health, blankets a form from a civilization, an ocean, and a culture away. It is as jarring as finding Gothic cathedral gargoyles covering an Aztec temple. The statues guarding the arched doorways deepen this cultural vertigo. They are carved from a dark basaltic rock standing about 4 feet tall. Their faces have the full lips, broad noses, and pronounced cheekbones characteristic of sculptural traditions from ancient West Africa, reminiscent of Nok terracottas or Benin bronze heads. Yet around the neck of each figure rests a thick, rigid collar, a perfect representation of a Celtic torque. This was the ultimate symbol of status and divinity among the Iron Age Celts of Europe, a twisted metal band worn by nobles and gods. The craftsmanship of the stone mimics the intricate, rope-like twist of a golden torque with impossible fidelity. Here, 2 distinct markers of identity, one African, one European, are fused into a single guardian, challenging the very idea of isolated cultural development. Even the floor tells a blended story. The central paving stone is a mosaic composed of colored minerals, forming a complex, interlocking pattern. At its heart is a swastika, a symbol of auspiciousness and the sun's cycle found in ancient India, Neolithic Europe, and among Native American tribes. Radiating from it are key patterns identical to those seen in ancient Greek meander borders, which themselves echo designs from Chinese bronze vessels. Surrounding this are bands of zigzags and spirals that are the hallmark of megalithic art from Newgrange in Ireland. This single floor is a congress of the world's oldest sacred geometries, laid as if they were all parts of the same universal language. This brutal syncretism does not just suggest casual contact or rare trade. A seashell can travel. A single foreign artifact can be a curiosity. What we see here is a profound, deep integration of artistic vocabulary, architectural forms, and religious iconography. It indicates a shared symbolic language, a common pool of myth and meaning that multiple, seemingly separate cultures were drawing from. This collapses the historical silos we have so carefully built. It breaks down the wall between the pre-Columbian Americas and the ancient Mediterranean, a wall founded on the doctrine of no contact before Columbus. It shatters the barrier between sub-Saharan Africa and prehistoric Europe, societies long studied in isolation from one another. It muddies the distinct developmental streams of Celtic, Indian, and Chinese ornamental art, suggesting a root, a common source, or a period of intense cross-pollination that our timelines have completely erased. The most disruptive implication is that of a common source civilization, a cultural wellspring so ancient that its echoes reverberated across the globe, influencing the foundational art and religion of civilizations we consider distinct. Alternatively, it paints a picture of a network, not of trade in goods, but of trade in ideas, where architects, priests, and artists traveled and exchanged blueprints for the divine. Either scenario rewrites the first chapters of human cultural history, replacing a story of separate, parallel evolution with one of connection, dialogue, and a shared heritage that was later forgotten, leaving behind only this cryptic, underground collage as its last and most defiant testament. This deliberate fusion of global art finds its ultimate expression not on the walls, but in the very bones of the structure, aimed at the heavens. The tomb is a celestial instrument, its architecture a frozen snapshot of a sky that no human eye from its supposed era could have seen. The two narrow shafts that rise from the burial chamber are not mere air vents. They are precise sightlines carved through solid rock. We already know one targets the star Sirius as it was 3,000 years ago. But the second shaft, the one aligned to that dim star in Cygnus, holds a secret far more profound. When astronomers calculated the exact angle of this shaft and traced its line back through the slow, grand wobble of Earth's axis, a pattern known as precession, they arrived at a date that stole the breath from the room. That shaft points directly to the spot where that star would have been the pole star, the unmoving center of the night sky, not in 1200 BCE, but roughly 13,000 years before that. This is not an alignment with a seasonal event like a solstice, which repeats every year. This is an alignment with a specific, unique moment in a 26,000-year celestial cycle, a moment that last occurred deep in the last ice age. The precision required to encode this is staggering. It means the builders did not just watch the stars, they measured their drift across millennia. They understood that the entire dome of the night sky slowly pivots around a fixed point over an epochal timescale, a concept Greek astronomers like Hipparchus would not formally describe for another 1,000 years. To incorporate this into architecture implies they had been observing and recording the heavens for generations, perhaps for centuries, building a data set of cosmic motion that our own science only reconstructed with the help of computers. But the sky map does not end with the shafts. The carvings on the ceiling, long thought to be abstract patterns, reveal themselves under spectral analysis to be something else entirely. The dots, lines, and connecting arcs form a recognizable constellation map, but not of the familiar zodiac. It charts a region of the southern sky, centering on the brilliant stars of the Southern Cross and the pointers Alpha and Beta Centauri. The problem is, from the tomb's latitude, these southern constellations never rise above the horizon. They are permanently invisible. To create this map, the artist must have stood somewhere far to the south, perhaps in the heart of Africa or even further, and memorized or recorded a sky they could not see from home. Even more baffling, the relative positions of the stars in this carved chart are not correct for the present day, or even for the Bronze Age. When astronomers digitally rewound the sky's clock, they found a match. The configuration aligns perfectly with the night sky as it appeared from a point in the southern hemisphere approximately 17,500 years ago. This turns the entire chamber into a time capsule with a double lock, a coordinate in both space and time. It is a map to a place the builders may have visited and an era they could not have physically witnessed. The implications are as clear as they are disruptive. The astronomical data encoded in the stone is far older than the tomb's physical construction date. This suggests the tomb was not designed from scratch in the late Bronze Age. It was built from a blueprint, a sacred template that was already ancient when the first stone was cut. The alignments and the star chart were copied from a source document that preserved knowledge of the heavens from a remote, prehistoric epoch. This pushes the origin of the design, the intellectual property of the tomb, back into the fog of the last glacial period, to a time when human societies are believed to have been small, nomadic bands of hunter-gatherers. What culture, then, possessed the sustained stability, the meticulous record-keeping, and the advanced mathematical understanding to track precession over such vast stretches of time? And why would a Bronze Age culture, thousands of years later, feel such reverence for this ancient celestial data that they would commit enormous resources to enshrine it in stone? The tomb becomes more than a burial. It becomes an act of homage to a forgotten science, a monument to astronomers whose names are lost to time, their greatest work buried under a mountain, waiting for an age that could see the stars but not yet understand the message written in their slow, eternal dance. The silent astronomy carved into the ceiling suggests a knowledge of cosmic forces, but some researchers believe a more tangible energy might still linger within the chamber walls. Beyond the solid archaeology, a persistent layer of modern anecdote has wrapped itself around the tomb, tales of strange readings and local unease that science struggles to explain. Teams conducting the initial survey reported recurring equipment malfunctions that defied easy diagnosis. Digital cameras, fully charged, would suddenly die upon entering the inner chamber, their batteries draining in minutes as if under an invisible load. High-sensitivity electromagnetic field meters brought in to rule out natural mineral deposits would spike erratically, not with the steady hum of an ore vein, but in sharp, unpredictable pulses that seemed to have no source. Most baffling were the readings from a Geiger counter, a device meant to detect radiation. In one corner of the room, near the base of the throne, it registered a faint but consistent level of cesium-137, a radioactive isotope that does not occur in nature. It is a byproduct of nuclear fission, a signature of the atomic age. The trace amount was minuscule, posing no health risk, but its very presence was an impossibility. Contamination was the first suspect, perhaps from a modern device or a researcher's watch. Yet a thorough sweep found no source, and the reading remained localized to that one spot, as if a single, invisible grain of the impossible had been left behind. These reports, often shared in hushed tones at academic conferences, are routinely attributed to instrument error, faulty grounding, or the power of suggestion in a highly charged environment. But their persistence has woven a thread of the uncanny into the site's official record. This technical unease finds an echo in the older stories held by the few nomadic families who have traversed this arid plateau for generations. Long before archaeologists arrived, the site had a name in their oral traditions. It was called the Stillness, or sometimes the Dreaming Stone. Elders spoke of a place where the wind did not sound right, where animals would not rest, and where a person might feel a sudden, profound disorientation, as if the landscape itself had briefly skipped a beat. There were warnings against camping too close, not because of ghosts in the traditional sense, but because of a more subtle theft, a sapping of vitality or a confusion of dreams. One particularly poignant legend tells of a shepherd who, decades ago, sought shelter in the shallow cave that once concealed the tomb's entrance. He emerged the next morning claiming to have seen vivid, waking dreams of cities under strange stars and great ships moving across star-filled voids, but he could not remember his own name for 3 days. These accounts have typically been dismissed as folklore, the kind of story that naturally attaches to any ancient, lonely place. But in the context of the electromagnetic glitches and that inexplicable radioactive whisper, they take on a new, more unsettling resonance. Together, they fuel speculative theories that venture beyond conventional archaeology. Could the tomb be more than a memorial? Some researchers, often from the fringes of alternative history, propose it might have been a kind of power source or a beacon, its construction harnessing natural telluric currents or even more exotic forms of energy now dormant or barely detectable. The strange alloy of the sword, the synthetic pigments, and the advanced mortar could be seen not just as superior craftsmanship, but as components of a larger, functional technology we no longer comprehend. The most cautious interpretation is that these energy anomalies, if real, are a residual effect, an echo of the construction process itself. Perhaps the method used to cut and fuse the stone or to create the tomb's unique materials left a faint, persistent imprint on the site's electromagnetic profile, a scar on reality that our instruments can barely sense and our old stories can only describe as magic. Whether dismissed as artifact or embraced as clue, this haze of mystery serves a powerful purpose. It reminds us that the tomb's defiance is not locked safely in the past. It manifests in the present as a lingering wrongness, a place that continues to interfere, to suggest, and to haunt the very tools we use to understand it. A discovery this disruptive was never going to be quietly accepted. the initial reports from the site ignited a firestorm within the hallowed halls of mainstream archaeology, a discipline built upon a carefully constructed timeline. The first reaction from many established experts was not curiosity, but a fortress of denial. Accusations flew like arrows across academic journals. It must be a sophisticated hoax, they argued, an elaborate fraud planted to discredit the field. Others pointed insistently to contamination, suggesting that modern groundwater or sloppy handling had corrupted every single radiocarbon sample and material analysis. Some dismissed the architecture as a later Roman-era construction that had simply been reused, ignoring the Bronze Age body seated at its heart. The most common rebuttal was simply to declare the dating methods faulty, a comforting retreat into the belief that our tools must be wrong because the alternative was unthinkable. This was not merely skepticism, it was the immune system of a paradigm attacking a perceived threat. Conferences that once dealt with pottery typologies and settlement patterns became arenas of fierce public debate. In one memorable session, a senior professor, red-faced, slammed his hand on the podium, calling the tomb's lead researcher an irresponsible sensationalist. Across the aisle, a younger, revisionist scholar fired back, holding up images of the star shaft alignments, declaring this was not an anomaly but the smoking gun that proved our history was a palimpsest, a story written over older, erased truths. The battle lines were drawn between the traditionalists, guardians of the incremental, linear timeline they had spent careers building, and a growing faction of revisionists who saw the tomb as the key to a lost chapter. For the archaeologists on the ground, the ones who had felt the cold stone and seen the impossible artifacts, this academic war created an impossible professional tightrope. To champion the find was to risk your reputation. You could be labeled fringe, a purveyor of pseudo-archaeology, your name whispered about in departments as someone who had lost their scholarly rigor. The consequences were brutally practical. Several team members found their applications for grant funding mysteriously rejected. A promising academic was advised by a mentor to distance herself from the project if she ever wanted tenure. The message was clear: touching this tomb could stain a career, turning a groundbreaking discovery into a professional curse. This created a chilling effect where some of the most intriguing data was initially held back, not out of secrecy but out of fear. The tomb, therefore, became a test of courage as much as a puzzle of history, challenging not only what we know about the past, but how willing we are to confront evidence that shatters our comfortable narrative. The academic storm over the tomb's validity misses its most profound implication, a possibility that echoes through humanity's oldest stories. Could this structure be a relic not from a known civilization, but from a lost one, a world shattered by a cataclysm and remembered only as myth? The tomb's impossible fusion and advanced technology read less like a local culture's innovation and more like the scattered inheritance of survivors. Its design pulls from architectural styles that would, in our timeline, develop independently across continents millennia apart. This is not the work of a single, isolated genius society, but rather a collection, a final gathering of a world's knowledge into one fortified vault. It mirrors the legend of Atlantis, described by Plato as a sophisticated empire that sank beneath the waves in a single day and night, its scholars and builders supposedly dispersing to influence cultures from Egypt to the Americas. The tomb feels like such an outpost, a last redoubt built to preserve a legacy against an impending doom. This idea finds startling resonance in a universal human memory, the Great Flood. From the epic of Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia to the story of Noah in the Hebrew Bible, from Deucalion in Greek myth to Manu in Hindu texts, and in hundreds of indigenous traditions worldwide, the narrative is eerily consistent. A civilization-ending deluge sent by the gods to wipe the slate clean. These are not just moral tales, they are cultural trauma written into our collective psyche. The tomb's suggested timeline, with its architectural blueprint dating back to the end of the last ice age, aligns suspiciously well with a period of profound global upheaval. Around 12,800 years ago, Earth experienced a sudden, brutal cold snap called the Younger Dryas. Geological evidence shows massive glacial meltwater pulses flooding into the oceans, drastic shifts in climate patterns, and evidence of widespread biomass burning. Some scientists point to a controversial but compelling hypothesis: the impact of comet fragments striking the Earth's ice sheets, triggering firestorms, mega-tsunamis, and a nuclear winter-like climate shift that could have decimated advanced human societies. This period marks the extinction of megafauna like the mammoth and the saber-toothed cat, and a dramatic transformation in how humans lived. What if the tomb's builders were witnesses to this? The star map on its ceiling, calibrated for a sky 17,000 years old, could be a preservation of their world's night, a sky from before the cataclysm. The collection of seeds from disparate continents might be a desperate attempt to save a biosphere they knew was about to be ravaged, a botanical ark in miniature. Even the strange energy readings and local legends of disorientation could be faint echoes of the atmospheric and geomagnetic chaos that such an event would unleash, a scar left on the very location. This transforms the tomb from a simple burial into a potential time capsule, a deliberate message in a bottle meant to survive the flood. Its builders, possessing a science we can barely recognize, may have understood their world was ending. They constructed not a monument to a king, but a library for the future, using materials designed to last epochs and encoding their knowledge in stone, metal, and alignment, hoping that one day, a new civilization would dig it up and understand the warning, or perhaps reclaim the lost inheritance. The tomb's greatest defiance, then, may not be against our history books, but against our amnesia, a physical challenge to the comforting idea that our story began from simple, humble origins. It whispers that we may be not the first chapter, but a later edition, built on the drowned foundations of a world we have only ever dreamed of in our oldest, most haunting myths. This collision of myth and potential catastrophe opens the door to another, even more controversial interpretation. Among the many theories swirling around the tomb, one has captured the public imagination like no other: the idea of ancient astronauts. Popularized by television shows and books in the field of alternative history, this hypothesis looks at the same impossible evidence and asks a simple, radical question: what if the builders were not from a lost human civilization, but from somewhere else entirely? Proponents of this view argue that the tomb is not a time capsule, but a landing beacon or a monument left by extraterrestrial visitors. They point directly to the evidence that mainstream archaeology finds so baffling. The precision engineering, with stone blocks cut and fitted to tolerances that seem to require machine tools, suggests a technology far beyond Bronze Age capabilities, perhaps even beyond our own. The strange, hybrid creatures carved into the walls are not mythological chimeras, they argue, but literal depictions of the visitors themselves, beings that combined biological forms or wore advanced environmental suits that primitive artists interpreted as part of their bodies. The depiction of a figure holding a staff emitting wavy lines is seen not as a symbol of divine power, but as a representation of a technological device, a tool or weapon. Most compelling for this theory is the astronomical data, the knowledge of precession, the star map of the permanently invisible southern sky, and the alignment with a celestial pole from 13,000 years ago, all suggest a perspective from above, a view from space, or from a civilization that had mapped the galaxy over immense stretches of time. How could an earthbound culture, they ask, know the precise configuration of stars from an epoch they never lived in, or chart constellations they could never see from their homeland? This, they say, is the signature of star travelers who recorded the heavens during their visit and passed that knowledge down, or perhaps even built the tomb as a marker using celestial coordinates only they would recognize. The undecipherable script, the Chronos code, becomes not a lost human language, but a true alien communication, a symbolic system based on mathematics or concepts our brains are not wired to parse. For many, this narrative provides a clean, dramatic solution to the mystery, explaining every anachronism and impossibility with a single, sweeping cause. The skeptical view, held by most academics, treats the ancient astronaut theory not as science, but as a powerful modern myth. They see it as a culturally significant narrative, a story we tell ourselves when confronted with gaps in our understanding. Throughout human history, whenever our ancestors encountered ruins or technologies they could not explain, they attributed them to gods, giants, or otherworldly beings. The ancient astronaut theory, skeptics argue, is simply the latest version of this impulse updated for a spacefaring age. It reflects a profound discomfort with the idea that ancient human cultures might have been far more ingenious and interconnected than we have given them credit for. The precision engineering, evidence of a sophisticated, lost human craft tradition, not alien intervention. The star maps, the result of patient, generations-long observation by dedicated astronomer priests whose records have otherwise vanished. The strange art, symbolic mythology, not literal portraiture. To dismiss it all as alien, they caution, is to rob our own ancestors of their potential genius and to ignore the incredible, demonstrable capacity of human innovation. Both perspectives, however, agree on one fundamental point: the tomb represents a profound rupture in our story. Whether its builders were human survivors of a forgotten golden age or visitors from another world, the structure stands as a permanent challenge. It forces us to admit that our past is not a simple, linear progression from cave to city, but a complex, possibly fractured narrative with missing pages and startling plot twists we are only beginning to glimpse. The debate between ancient astronauts and human genius may miss a third, more unsettling possibility. What if the tomb is not a product of history at all, but a tear in its fabric? This is the time slip theory, a speculative idea that treats the tomb not as a built structure, but as a literal anomaly. Proponents suggest it could be an object that has fallen out of its proper chronological place, like a stone skipping across the pond of time and landing in the wrong era. In this view, the conflicting dates are not a puzzle to be solved, but the central clue. The Bronze Age organic materials and the Roman-era mortar are both correct because the tomb does not belong to either period exclusively. It is a patchwork of times forcibly stitched together by some unknown cosmic event. This idea, while wildly speculative and lacking a scientific mechanism, resonates because it addresses the sheer cognitive dissonance of the find. It frames the tomb as a wound in reality, a place where the rules of cause and effect have briefly broken down. While compelling as a thought experiment, most researchers dismiss it as an abandonment of scientific inquiry, a mystical surrender to the inexplicable. A more grounded, though still radical, alternative is the lost advanced civilization hypothesis. This theory sidesteps the need for aliens or time warps by proposing a simple, earthbound answer. What if, before the rise of any known ancient empire, a sophisticated human culture achieved a brief, brilliant zenith? This civilization, perhaps a maritime network of explorers and traders, could have connected distant shores, exchanging architectural ideas, artistic styles, and technological secrets. They might have developed early forms of concrete, understood precession, and mapped the globe. Then, around the tumultuous end of the last ice age, this network collapsed, shattered by climatic catastrophe like the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. Their cities sank or were buried, their knowledge fragmented and carried by survivors who seeded myths of floods and lost golden ages among the emerging cultures of Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, and the Americas. The tomb, in this scenario, becomes a relic of that progenitor culture, a last outpost built with their surviving knowledge. Its fusion of global styles is not a mystery, but a snapshot of a connected world. The anachronistic materials are not impossible, they are simply the advanced technology of that lost age. This theory provides an elegant, human-centric explanation for the global echoes in the tomb's art and the advanced science in its construction, suggesting we are not the first to attempt a civilization, merely the latest to forget we had predecessors. Finally, there is the theory of deliberate obfuscation, a calculated act of historical forgery. This idea strips away the supernatural and the prehistoric, proposing the tomb was built much later, perhaps in the early Roman era or even the medieval period, by a ruler or cult with a specific political agenda. Why would anyone go to such extravagant, technically demanding lengths to create a fake ancient tomb? The answer is legitimacy. Throughout history, claiming a connection to a legendary past has been a powerful tool for authority. A new dynasty, seeking to cement its rule over a region, might commission a spectacular discovery, a tomb of a mythical founder king, complete with impossible artifacts and indecipherable script, to prove their divine right to rule was ancient and preordained. The builders would have used the most advanced materials and knowledge of their own time, the Roman concrete, the sophisticated alloys, while carefully planting older organic materials to fool future dating methods. They would have scavenged or replicated artifacts from various cultures to create an air of mystical, global wisdom for their fabricated ancestor. The undecipherable script is not a lost language, but a brilliant fake, designed to be unbreakable and thus eternally mysterious, elevating the enshrined figure to godlike status. This theory is chillingly pragmatic. It turns the tomb from a mystery of the past into a propaganda piece, a weapon of information warfare crafted to manipulate the beliefs of its own time and inadvertently to confound our own. It suggests the greatest deception may not be in hiding the truth, but in constructing a lie so magnificent and durable that it outlives the empire it was meant to serve and becomes a ghost in our historical machine. Each of these speculative frameworks, the time slip, the lost civilization, and the deliberate fraud, offers a different lens. One sees a cosmic accident, another a forgotten human dawn, and a third a cunning political theater. They all, however, circle the same undeniable core, that this tomb, regardless of its origin, exists as a permanent question mark. It has successfully done what perhaps its builders, whoever they were, intended. It has stopped us in our tracks and forced us to doubt the story we thought we knew. Accepting the tomb's evidence would not merely add a footnote to history, it would burn the current volume and demand we write a new one from the ashes. Our textbooks, with their clean, upward arrows tracing humanity's climb from simple stone tools to silicon chips, would be revealed as a comforting fiction. That linear narrative of progress, the bedrock of how we teach our past, would shatter. In its place, we would have to confront a far more turbulent and mysterious story, one of cycles, not a straight line. Human technological development would no longer look like a steady ascent, but a heartbeat on a monitor, with powerful peaks of advancement followed by catastrophic flatlines, where knowledge itself was nearly erased. The tomb stands as potential proof of one such peak, a zenith of science and art that predates every known cradle of civilization by millennia. This cyclical model suggests our own modern age might not be the first time humanity has gazed at the stars with understanding, but could be the next in a series of forgotten renaissances, each rising from the ruins of the last. This seismic shift would force a humbling and profound reevaluation of cultures we have long labeled primitive. The very word would lose its meaning. The tomb's builders, whoever they were, existed in what our timeline calls the Late Bronze Age, a period we associate with chariots and simple kingdoms. Yet they, or their ancestors, apparently mastered concrete, celestial mechanics, and global navigation. If they could achieve this, what other sophisticated knowledge might have been held by other so-called primitive societies, knowledge that left no stone monuments behind? The intricate astronomical lore of Aboriginal Australians, mapping the sky in songlines for over 60,000 years. the precise engineering of Polynesian voyagers who navigated vast oceans by reading waves and stars, the complex ecological understanding of Amazonian tribes. These would no longer be seen as isolated curiosities, but as surviving fragments of deep, systemic wisdom, perhaps echoes of that lost cyclical peak. We would have to acknowledge that sophistication is not synonymous with skyscrapers and steel, that advanced understanding of the natural world can exist without an industrial footprint, and that our definition of advanced has been hopelessly narrow. The domino effect would topple our core assumptions about innovation and cultural exchange. The current model often paints ancient cultures as isolated islands, with breakthroughs like agriculture or writing inventing independently in a few lucky places. The tomb's fusion of global styles screams the opposite. It suggests a prehistoric world far more connected than we dared believe. Innovation, then, might not be a spark that catches in one dry tinderbox, but a flame passed along trade routes of unimaginable antiquity, shared, adapted, and lost across continents. The story of human achievement would become a collaborative, global epic, not a series of separate, parallel threads. This rewrites the epic of human progress itself. That grand narrative, from hunter-gatherers to farmers to city dwellers to us, would be exposed as just the latest chapter, perhaps even a recovery chapter. Our journey would no longer be from simplicity to complexity, but from one form of complexity to another, with a dark age of forgetting in between. We would have to ask ourselves a haunting question: are we building a new world, or are we, brick by brick, rediscovering an old one? The tomb's greatest gift may not be the answers in its stones, but the liberating, terrifying doubt it casts on the story we tell about ourselves, opening a door to a past infinitely richer and more strange than we ever imagined. But with a discovery this threatening, silence often follows the initial uproar. Whispers began to circulate, not in academic journals, but in the darker corners of the internet and among fringe researchers. They spoke of artifacts that vanished overnight from the site inventory, of government officials in plain clothes arriving to oversee the excavation, and of a sudden, unexplained media blackout. The most persistent rumor claims that a single, most revealing object, a crystalline data storage device of some kind, was found in the tomb and immediately confiscated by a three-letter agency, locked away in a warehouse alongside other world-altering secrets. This narrative taps into the powerful concept of knowledge filtration, the idea that powerful institutions, whether governments, academic bodies, or religious organizations, actively suppress evidence that could destabilize the established order of history, economics, or even human identity. The theory argues that admitting a lost advanced civilization would collapse the foundation of our cultural and historical authority, rendering textbooks obsolete and challenging the very narrative of human supremacy and progress. So, the gatekeepers, according to this law, quietly bury the truth to maintain control. What verifiable facts exist to fuel these conspiracies? It is true that access to the tomb site became heavily restricted shortly after the initial publications caused such academic controversy. Permits for independent researchers were suddenly and uniformly denied, with reasons citing site preservation and ongoing study. A preliminary report from the lead archaeological team, promised within a year of the discovery, was delayed for over 3 years. When it was finally released, several appendices detailing the anomalous material compositions were labeled as pending further peer review and were omitted from the public document. A physicist who consulted on the metallic alloys reported that his full analysis was classified as confidential by the host country's antiquities ministry, a move he called unprecedented in his 40-year career. These documented instances of secrecy are not proof of a global cover-up, but they are the kind of bureaucratic shadows in which conspiracy theories thrive. The official explanations are always logical, protecting intellectual property, preventing looting, or ensuring rigorous verification before releasing explosive data. Yet, the gap between the official story and the hushed rumors creates a vacuum, and nature, along with human curiosity, abhors a vacuum. These darker narratives gain traction precisely because the tomb's official story feels incomplete and deeply unsettling. When mainstream science responds with dismissal or silence, and when access is barred, it feels less like caution and more like containment. The public, presented with a mystery that challenges reality itself, and then told they cannot see the evidence, will naturally suspect that the truth is being hidden because it is too dangerous to know. This creates a fascinating duality around the tomb. In the light, it is an archaeological puzzle. In the shadows, it has become a modern myth, a symbol of forbidden knowledge and institutional fear. Whether any artifact was actually taken or any report deliberately buried may be less important than the cultural reaction itself. The very existence of these suppression conspiracies proves the tomb's power. It has become an idea so disruptive that we imagine vast forces must be mobilized to keep it quiet, a testament to just how deeply its silent stones have shaken the foundation of our story. The whispers of conspiracy and cover-up only made the scientific resolve stronger. When the doors of traditional access seemed to close, technology found a new way to look through the walls. The investigation did not end with the academic debates. It evolved, trading trowels for terabytes in an attempt to peer into the stone without ever touching it. The first breakthrough came from the sky. A low-flying aircraft equipped with LiDAR, a laser mapping system, swept over the arid plateau. By stripping away the digital vegetation and surface clutter, the scans revealed what the human eye had missed for centuries, a vast geometric pattern etched into the bedrock surrounding the tomb. It was a network of shallow channels and aligned stone markers, forming a colossal, three-ringed design centered on the burial chamber itself, like a giant target or a ceremonial complex spanning nearly a square mile. This was not a lone monument. It was the heart of a much larger, invisible landscape, a sacred geometry hidden in plain sight that contextualized the tomb as the focal point of a forgotten ritual space. On the ground, teams rolled out ground-penetrating radar units, sending pulses of energy deep into the earth. The initial goal was simple: to map the tomb's foundation and ensure no structural voids threatened its stability. What the radar returns showed was anything but simple. The data painted a ghostly image of the subsurface, revealing that the circular burial chamber was not the end of the story. It was merely the top level of a structure descending like an inverted wedding cake. The scans showed clear, man-made anomalies, suggesting a second, larger chamber directly beneath the first, and faint hints of a possible third level even deeper. These were not natural caves. Their shapes were too regular, too rectilinear. The implications were staggering. The known tomb, with all its impossible artifacts, might only be the antechamber, a decorative foyer for a much more significant secret still buried in the dark. Furthermore, the radar detected what appeared to be narrow, tunnel-like features snaking away from the lower chambers, extending for dozens of yards in different directions before the signal was lost. Are these escape routes additional storage or connections to other, undiscovered sites? The ground, it seems, is hollow with mystery. Inside the chamber itself, the most delicate work began. To preserve the integrity of the site, no new physical samples were taken. Instead, advanced three-dimensional laser scanners were deployed. Every inch of the walls, the ceiling, the throne, and the artifacts was mapped with sub-millimeter precision, creating a perfect digital twin of the entire space. This virtual model allowed researchers to study the tomb from continents away, manipulating light and shadow in ways impossible on site. When the scan data of the inscribed walls was processed with special reflectance transformation imaging, a technique that highlights surface variations, something extraordinary emerged. Sections of the Chronos code, which appeared as flat carvings to the naked eye, were revealed to be subtly raised in certain sequences. It was a tactile code within a visual code, a braille for the initiated. Even more startling, the scans of the star map ceiling showed microscopic drill holes at the points representing the brightest stars, holes that once may have held tiny gemstones or metal inserts to make the constellation glitter in torchlight. This was a level of artisan detail no one had anticipated, transforming the map from a mere diagram into a functional, illuminated representation of the ancient sky. The biological evidence also received a technological second look. While no new DNA could be extracted, the existing data from the seeds and the skeletal remains was reanalyzed with the latest paleogenomic tools. The genetic story of the seeds was confirmed, their origins defiantly spanning multiple continents. The DNA from the occupant, however, yielded a subtler clue. Preliminary analysis had shown the individual was an outlier. The deeper genomic sequencing revealed a surprising lack of genetic markers associated with local populations, not just of that era, but of any era in that region's long history. It was as if this person, or their very recent ancestors, had no deep genetic connection to the land in which they were entombed. They were a true stranger. Furthermore, the study of dental calculus, the hardened plaque on the teeth, provided a snapshot of their final years. It contained microfossils from plants not native to the region, including a type of aquatic tuber found only in Southeast Asia, and traces of a specific pollen from a flower that blooms only in the high Andes. This person's body carried a biography of global travel written in the dust of their meals, a final testament to a life of immense, inexplicable journeys. So has modern technology solved the mystery? In many ways, it has deepened it. The LiDAR revealed the tomb's grand scale, the radar hinted at its hidden depth, and the scans uncovered new layers of complexity in its inscriptions. Science has not yet provided a single, neat answer that satisfies the establishment. Instead, it has systematically eliminated many of the simpler explanations, like hoax or later reuse, by confirming the integrity and staggering sophistication of the original construction. The tools of the 21st century are acting not as a lockpick, but as a magnifying glass, showing us that the puzzle is far more intricate than we first imagined. Each new scan, each new data point pulls back another veil, only to reveal there is another veil behind it. The investigation is now a dialogue between the silent, stone defiance of the past and the persistent, digital curiosity of the present. A conversation that promises more revelations are waiting, not in the pages of a history book, but in the silent echoes of the earth itself. Our tomb is not the only silent rebel in the archaeological record. Around the world, other structures stand as stubborn outliers, whispering that our past is filled with gaps. In China, the tomb of the first emperor remains unopened, its secrets guarded by a legend of rivers of shimmering mercury, a toxic sea meant to simulate the waters of his empire for eternity. While our tomb's mysteries are laid bare, the first emperor's chamber is a locked box, its most tantalizing clues like the terracotta army, hinting at a grandeur we can only imagine but not yet verify. Off the coast of Japan, the Yonaguni Monument lies submerged beneath the waves, its massive stepped terraces and right-angled plains sparking fierce debate. Is it a natural geological formation shaped by currents, or the drowned ruins of a civilization lost when sea levels rose at the end of the last ice age? Like our tomb's star shafts, Yonaguni presents a simple, brutal question. Are we looking at nature's random art or humanity's sunken fingerprint? In the jungles of Costa Rica, hundreds of nearly perfect stone spheres, some weighing over 15 tons, are scattered in mysterious arrangements. Their purpose is utterly lost, their makers unknown, and their method of creation, achieving such spherical precision with stone tools, remains a profound puzzle. They share with our tomb a signature of inexplicable craftsmanship, a technological signature without a clear cultural author. Then, of course, there is the Great Pyramid of Giza, a monument so familiar its strangeness is often forgotten. Its base is leveled to within a fraction of an inch across 13 acres. Its sides are aligned to the cardinal points with an error of less than 1/10 of a degree. The precision of its stonework, the complexity of its internal chambers, and the sheer logistical nightmare of its construction continue to fuel endless theories. It shares with our tomb that sense of impossible engineering, a leap in capability that seems to come from nowhere in the historical timeline. Yet, for all its wonders, the Great Pyramid fits, however uneasily, within the known chronology of pharaonic Egypt. We have the cultural context, the progression of earlier pyramids, and the hieroglyphic records. Its mystery is one of method and motive, not of fundamental anachronism. This is what sets our featured tomb apart and makes it perhaps the most comprehensive challenge of all. It does not present a single mystery like submerged stones or perfect spheres. It is not a locked door like the first emperor's mound, nor a stunning but contextually placed wonder like the Great Pyramid. Instead, it is a perfect storm of defiance. It combines the architectural enigma of Yonaguni, the lost craftsmanship mystery of the Costa Rican spheres, the material anachronism of a Mercury river, and the celestial precision of the pyramids, all wrapped around a biological and genetic riddle. It is not one outlier, it is a collection of every type of outlier housed under one stone dome. The other sites ask how or why. This tomb asks when and who, and most disturbingly, how is any of this even possible together? It suggests that if the other mysteries are single notes from a lost song, this tomb might be the entire score, waiting for an ear that can finally hear its melody. Archaeology rarely escapes the dusty halls of academia, but this tomb shattered that rule completely. It did not just enter the public consciousness, it exploded into it, transforming from a dig site into a full-blown cultural phenomenon. The journey began with a single, leaked photograph of the throne room, grainy and mysterious, posted on a forum for alternative history. From there, it was a wildfire. Major documentary networks, sensing the potent mix of mystery and science, rushed to produce specials, their titles dripping with intrigue, like The Tomb That Time Forgot and Secrets of the Anachronism, a nickname that stuck instantly. These programs did more than report findings. They framed the mystery as a detective story, with scientists as the perplexed investigators and the tomb as the inscrutable culprit. YouTube became its own excavation site. Channels dedicated to ancient mysteries, physics, and even true crime launched multi-part deep dives, analyzing every pixel of the released scans, comparing the tomb's spirals to symbols from a dozen cultures, and crafting elaborate timelines that connected it to everything from Atlantis to hypothetical ancient astronauts. The comment sections on these videos became virtual symposiums where high school students debated PhDs and engineers argued with historians over the feasibility of Bronze Age concrete. Online forums dedicated to the tomb with names like the Chronos Codex sprang up, amassing thousands of members who dissect every new rumor, share their own decipherment attempts of the wall script, and build sprawling, collaborative theory boards that look like detective work from a cyberpunk thriller. The tomb's influence bled into pure fiction. Best-selling thriller novels now feature plots where the tomb holds the key to stopping a modern-day apocalypse. A blockbuster video game released an expansion pack where players explore a fantastical version of the chambers, solving puzzles based on the real star alignments and fending off guardians inspired by the hybrid wall carvings. On social media, the tomb's triple spiral symbol has become a popular tattoo, a badge of allegiance to questioning the official story. TikTok trends have users creating what-if scenarios about the tomb's builder set to epic music. It has become a shared sandbox for the imagination, a space where anyone can project their questions about history, technology, and human potential. This widespread embrace reveals something profound. The academic debate may be about carbon dates and stratigraphy, but the public fascination is about narrative. In a world where so much is known and mapped, the tomb offers a genuine, sprawling mystery. It provides a blank canvas onto which we can paint our biggest questions about forgotten origins and lost greatness. It has stopped being just an archaeological site. It has become a modern myth in the making, a story we are all actively writing together, proving that the most powerful discoveries are not those that give us answers, but those that give us endless, wonderful questions. For Dr. Ilara Vance, the tomb began as a career-ending mistake. A renowned specialist in Bronze Age trade networks, she had built her reputation on meticulous, incremental work, connecting dots across maps with pottery shards and lead isotopes. When her junior survey team first radioed in about the anomalous archway, her reaction was pure professional annoyance. It was a geological fluke, she insisted, or worse, a later Roman folly that would waste precious weeks of field season. Skepticism was her default language, the necessary shield against the fringe theories that constantly buzzed around archaeology. She arrived at the trench expecting to debunk a curiosity, to give a lecture on proper identification of masonry styles, and to get her team back on schedule. The moment her fingers traced the seam between the impossibly smooth stones, however, her certainty crumbled. It was a physical sensation, she later said, like touching something that was both ice-cold and humming with a silent frequency. Her world of orderly timelines didn't just bend in that instant, it snapped. The professional cost was immediate and brutal. Colleagues she'd known for decades, people she'd shared conference dinners with, began to treat her published papers with a new, cautious silence. Granting bodies that had once championed her work now replied with polite, formulaic rejections. She was invited to fewer panels, her opinions suddenly carrying the faint, dangerous scent of the unorthodox. The weight of being the face of such a disruptive find was isolating, yet the personal transformation was more profound than the professional shunning. In her most candid interview, she described a night spent alone at the site, long after her team had retired to camp. The desert was utterly silent, the sky a vault of infinite stars. She was sitting before the open tomb entrance, the black maw seeming to swallow the starlight. I wasn't thinking about carbon dates or journal publications, she recalled. I was simply overwhelmed by the sheer, humble fact of my own ignorance. All my expertise, every textbook I'd written, felt like a child's sketch compared to the reality sitting in the dark before me. It was the most liberating moment of my life. That liberation came with a heavy price, a constant, grinding tension between the scientist who demanded verifiable answers and the explorer who had glimpsed a mystery that defied them. Her most bewildering moment didn't involve a glittering artifact or a complex inscription. It was something far simpler. During the careful excavation of the floor mosaic, a conservator found a single, perfect fingerprint pressed into the drying mortar of a corner tile, preserved for over 3 millennia. It was a human moment, a tiny accident of a worker leaning too close as they set the final piece. Vance requested a copy of the scan. Late one evening in her makeshift site office, she placed her own finger over the image on her screen. The scale was identical. The architect of this impossible place, the master of lost sciences and celestial mathematics, had been a person. They had knelt on a floor, pressed a tile into place, and left a fleeting, intimate mark of their presence. The fingerprint, she said, voice quiet, erased all the grand theories of aliens or time travelers for me. This was built by human hands, but whose hands? And what kind of human mind could hold the blueprint for such a thing? That is the question that now keeps me awake. It has cost me the clean narrative of my career, but it has given me a far greater gift, a lifelong conversation with a mystery. After years of laser scans, genetic tests, and fierce debate, the stone chamber yields data but refuses to surrender its soul. The core of the mystery remains untouched, a series of questions that echo louder with every answer we fail to find. First and most fundamental, who built it? We have the fingerprint, but not the face. Was it a lone, advanced culture now lost to the sea, as the flood myth suggests? Or was it a collaborative effort, a conclave of master architects and astronomer priests from across the ancient world, converging at this remote plateau to construct a vault for their collective wisdom? The genetic stranger on the throne deepens this riddle. Was he the architect, a revered guest from afar, or a symbolic sacrifice to a knowledge he represented? We simply do not know. This leads directly to the second enigma. What was this place truly for? A tomb seems too small a purpose for such grand defiance. The celestial alignments argue for an observatory, a stone computer locked on the turning points of cosmic time. The collection of global seeds and artifacts suggests a time capsule, a deliberate archive for a future civilization. The strange energy readings and advanced materials fuel speculation it was a power source, a technological node now dormant. Perhaps it was all these things at once, a multifunctional monument where science, spirituality, and survival strategy were indivisible. Then there is the maddening puzzle of the artifacts themselves. How does a Bronze Age society acquire or manufacture stainless steel, synthetic ultramarine, and pure aluminum? Did they possess a lost high science, a different path of discovery that was later erased? Or were these items, as some desperately suggest, relics from a much older, even more advanced predecessor civilization, carefully preserved as holy objects? Their presence feels less like burial goods and more like a curated exhibition of impossible physics. Fourth, why here, of all places on Earth? Why this lonely, windswept plateau? Its remoteness suggests a desire for secrecy or protection, a place to hide something precious from a cataclysm or from prying eyes. Yet, its specific geology offered no special resources, no rare minerals not found elsewhere. Was it a sacred junction of telluric energy lines, a place where the Earth's power was thought to be strongest? Or was it a neutral ground, a place belonging to no kingdom, chosen precisely because it was a blank slate on the map of the ancient world? The location itself is a statement we cannot read. For all our technology, we are left circling the same void. The tomb is a locked door, and we have polished the handle to a shine, mapped every scratch on its surface, and analyzed the molecular composition of its paint, but the key is still missing. This enduring shroud is not a failure of science, it is the essence of the discovery's power. It holds us in a state of wonder, a perpetual almost knowing that is far more compelling than any tidy answer could ever be. But beyond the fingerprints and the star maps, the true power of this tomb lies not in the questions it asks of the past, but in the questions it forces us to ask of ourselves. This is far more than an archaeological puzzle to be solved. It is a profound lesson in intellectual humility. For centuries, we have confidently assembled the story of human civilization like a mosaic, carefully placing each pottery shard, each inscribed tablet, each fallen column into a grand and seemingly coherent picture. We have written textbooks, built museum exhibits, and crafted documentaries that present this narrative as settled fact, a linear march from primitive to advanced. This tomb is a fragment that does not fit. It is a piece from a different picture entirely, dropped into our mosaic and demanding we reconsider the whole design. It is a physical reminder that history is not a fixed truth waiting to be uncovered, but a story we actively construct from the fragments that survive, and every new discovery holds the power to dismantle and rebuild that story from the ground up. This should not discourage us, it should liberate us. The tomb shatters the arrogance of thinking we have the past figured out. It whispers that the ancient world was not a simple, slow-motion prelude to our modern brilliance, but a dynamic, potentially global stage where cultures exchanged ideas across vast distances, where genius manifested in ways we have forgotten how to see, and where the line between myth and history might be far thinner than we suppose. Think of it like this: if our understanding of the past is a map, this tomb is a newly discovered continent that forces us to redraw all the coastlines. It champions curiosity over certainty, In a world saturated with instant answers, the tomb offers a majestic, enduring mystery. It invites everyone, from the professional scientist to the casual viewer, to engage in the raw, thrilling process of inquiry. It models critical thinking, showing that even the most established narratives must be tested against new evidence. And above all, it restores a sense of wonder. It asks us to look at a simple stretch of desert and understand that beneath the dust may lie not just bones and pottery, but entire lost chapters of the human experiment, stories of exploration, catastrophe, and resilience that redefine who we are and where we come from. The greatest treasure in that stone chamber may not be gold or gears, but the gift of a more mysterious, more magnificent, and infinitely more interesting past. From a single brushstroke in the dust to a global conversation, this tomb has taken us on a journey through the impossible. We began with a shock, a doorway that should not have existed, and descended into a labyrinth that defies every convention we hold dear. It has challenged our chronology with dates that refuse to align. It has mocked our cultural boundaries, weaving a tapestry of art from continents apart. It has defied our understanding of progress, presenting a technology that feels both ancient and eerily advanced. This is not merely an archaeological find. It is a monumental question mark carved in stone, a permanent puncture in the smooth narrative of our past. It stands as a humbling reminder that history is not a closed book, but a living story being rewritten with every turn of the earth. Perhaps the greatest discovery here is not about the builders, but about ourselves and our capacity to be astonished. It invites us to live comfortably with mystery, to find wonder in the gaps of our knowledge, and to keep asking the big, beautiful questions. What theory about this tomb resonates most with you? Which of its countless puzzles still keeps you up at night? Share your thoughts below, and if you are hungry for more journeys to the edges of our understanding, be sure to subscribe. Our next deep dive into history's greatest enigmas is already waiting.